It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.
George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
A funny thing happened to me on the way to the studio, and as you can see, I'm in a hotel room, Milton Keynes style. Well, the needle in a haystack search for the killer of JFK is, I suspect, not that much further forward today, following the release of the JFK files, if indeed they were all released. A needle in a haystack from which the needle has been removed. But some things stand out. First of all, Russia warned the United States that Lee Harvey Oswald was planning to kill President Kennedy, just as they warned the United States prior to 9/11. Who is the enemy then? And the peace candidate, Donald Trump, has come in a blaze of glory and blood. And the United Kingdom political situation is beginning to get even more interesting. It's all coming up tonight here on the mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
The United States carried out acts of mass murder against the people of Yemen over these last few days, night after night, raining down fire, death and destruction from shot and shell, from the air and from the sea. Netanyahu has entered what he described, or what was helpfully described for him by what passes for the snake screen media here in Western countries, a pinpoint invasion of Gaza. Rather like the limited invasion of Rafah that they promised the hapless and semi-comatose Joe Biden last year. But let's start with Yemen. The Yemeni people are the poorest people in the world, but in fact they are the wealthiest. They are the wealthiest in spirit, in morale, and in integrity. The Yemeni people, way and far away in the Gulf, on the Red Sea, have no need to concern themselves with what's happening in the Gaza Strip to the Palestinian refugee population there, especially when the countries closest to Palestine are arch collaborators, each and every one, including the newest of them, the Al-Qaeda, ISIS-ruled, now not Republic of Syria. When Palestine's neighbors are not only doing nothing, but actively collaborating with the slaughter of their presumed, supposed co-religionists, fellow Arabs, fellow Levantines, you could have forgiven the Yemeni people, who themselves suffered not just poverty, but regime change operation after operation, and a full-scale war, guided, fueled, armed by the most powerful Western countries and carried out by their very own neighbors in the Persian Gulf. You could have forgiven the Yemeni people if they'd said, we'll have to sit this one out. But that's the very last thing that they have done. Alone of all Arab states, all 23 of them, the people of Yemen have stepped up to the plate and done what they consider their national and indeed religious duty, to do everything within their power to come to the aid of the slaughtered, the besieged, the crucified Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. And my goodness, what power they turned out to have. Only in the last 48 hours, they landed a ballistic missile called Palestine right in the middle of the Negev desert, on top of the Israeli Air Force's best and finest planes, men and women. They were on the tarmac. I don't know if you saw the picture. They were assembled in the parade ground for a fly-past or a flag-waving, flag-raising ceremony. And they all had to hit the deck, all 500 of them, lying prostrate on the ground, because this missile had come all the way from Yemen. It's a small answer, but it's a much bigger answer than anybody else in the Arab world has been able to deliver. The breach of the ceasefire agreement by Netanyahu is painfully easy to see the rationale for, but none, and I mean none, not one single one of the snake scream media has seen fit to enlighten their viewers or their readers about it. If Netanyahu had not broken the ceasefire, if Netanyahu had not launched a blistering air attack killing 460 people in one single night, 300 of them in one single hour, almost all of them women and children, all over again, Nightmare on Elm Street, back again and again and again. If Netanyahu had not done that on that particular day, he would have had to appear the next day in a court in Tel Aviv to give evidence about his own corruption in his own trial. But of course, the court hearing had to be postponed because, hey, Israel was at war in Gaza again. If you can't see what's going on here, you clearly are blind, willfully blind, the worst kind of blindness. But the slaughter from the air has, and by the way, also from warships off the coast of Gaza, has now been joined by what the Israeli mouthpiece in Britain, LBC, helpfully described as a pinpoint ground invasion. Pinpoint. With pins. They're going in with pins. And they've got a clear point. Although when we see the casualties from it, they are almost certainly to be the same melancholy, dismal parade of women and children torn to pieces. Some of the video, some of the pictures this week has been extremely painful to watch, probably because, well, we had hoped and prayed that we would not have to look at these things again. Fathers holding their little children stone cold dead. Fathers fondling the pigtails of their little daughters just prior to laying them in the cold earth. The savagery of the barbarians in Israeli uniforms is breathtaking, not just because of the horror that it delivers, but the absolute insouciance with which the world's Western leaders, forever in a paroxysm about Russia and Ukraine, have completely ignored. Not one of them has said one word about the resumption of the slaughter in blatant defiance of the ceasefire agreement, which was solemn and binding, we were told. There's no question about who is to blame. The Palestinians have done nothing but comply in toto with their obligations under the ceasefire agreement, which you will recall had the imprimatur, albeit by auto pen, of President Biden of the United States of America. Although it was brokered, we were told, by the peace president, Donald Trump. Donald Trump gave the green light for the slaughter in Gaza the night before last. Of that there is no doubt. The Israelis said it, and the United States press officer also said it. She endorsed the statement that came out from Tel Aviv that they had been consulted in advance of this mass murder. This mass murder is of a level of the very worst of days over the last year and a half of nightly mass murder. It was not followed by mass murder last night, but it has been followed today by this pinpoint ground invasion, together, of course, with bombardments. The bombardment never stops. I've used the word barbaric and barbarian for two reasons. One, because it is, and second, because the, how shall I put it, academically challenged President of the United States of America, a man who has probably only read one book in his entire life, a man whose only book is The Art of the Deal, has taken routinely to describing the people of Yemen as barbarians. He also called them pirates, though, as my good friend Garland Nixon, who helpfully stood in for me on Wednesday evening, put it, the American people think they're on an ocean liner, but in fact they're on board a pirate ship. The pirates are you, President Trump. The barbarian is you. That you should imagine that the part of the world that invented mathematics, the part of the world that invented the number zero, the part of the world that invented algebra and geometry, the part of the world that had the world's greatest library when we were living in the woods with our faces painted blue, and your country didn't even exist for 2,000 years afterwards, that you should call them barbarians when it is you who is slaughtering their children in their home when they have never done anything to you. In fact, the United States, throughout the Biden presidency, was bombing Yemen with great regularity. The United States has never done killing Yemenis, but they have still never done anything to you. Their threat was to Israeli shipping, a kind of modern-day armed picket line. Any vehicles, vessels going to or from the country that is committing genocide in Gaza will be intercepted by us, captured if possible, sunk if not. Well, actually, that was the only lawful act that is possible to do in the face of what the ICJ has called genocide. The highest court in the world requires all states to do what Yemen has done. It legally requires every state in the world to do everything that it can to interdict acts of genocide. So actually, the Yemenis are not the brigands, the pirates, least of all the barbarians. They're the only ones in this entire picture who are behaving lawfully, legally. And in any case, they were doing it only to Israel. I know you wanted Canada as your 51st state, or maybe that was Greenland. Is Israel your 51st state, President Trump? Because if not, you told us that you were an America first man. You told us you were going to make America great again. MAGA, you called it. Not MIGA, make Israel great again. And if I seem to be preoccupied by Israel on this day that the JFK files have been released, maybe it's because I'm looking, and I've now read 1,000 pages, I'm looking for a needle in a haystack, but I suspect you've already removed the needle from the haystack. And that needle is called Israel. The only thing that has been redacted of note in the entire 80,000 pages is any and all reference to the Israeli Secret Service, Mossad. Now, the reason I know that is because you couldn't even get that right. Because whilst it's redacted throughout within brackets, it isn't redacted at all in several of the early pages. Your redactors missed it. So we now know what the brackets mean. We know what the brackets of that length mean, and they mean the Israeli Secret Service. I cannot say that I myself have yet found or could reasonably conclude that Israel was involved in the Nightmare on Elm Street in Dallas on November 22nd, 1963. But I've seen some pretty powerful clues. A man called James Angleton, buried with full military honors in Israel, who was the head of counterintelligence operations for decades in the CIA, ironically his middle name was Jesus, was an Israeli agent. That much is stated not even in brackets. It's stated in your own documents that Angleton was an Israeli agent. And we know that he was deeply involved in the run-up to the assassination of President Kennedy, in the building of a casus belli against President Kennedy, particularly Kennedy's determination to thwart Israeli efforts to acquire nuclear weapons entirely illegally, which they continued to hold in profusion, uninspected, not subject to any treaty, not subject to any inspection by the IAEA or the Non-Proliferation Treaty experts. They got that bomb illegally, and they got it thanks to people like James Angleton. And when Kennedy didn't like it and hauled Ben-Gurion to answer for the illegal act of building secretly a nuclear weapon, Angleton and his Israeli controllers determined that President Kennedy had to go one way or another. Sure, they had fertile ground. They did, it seems, have at large an assassin called Lee Harvey Oswald. He was called an assassin in writing by Moscow prior to the assassination of President Kennedy. Yes, that's right. The Soviet Union warned America that Lee Harvey Oswald had purchased a weapon and was going to kill President Kennedy. If only they'd listened to the Soviet Union, which was warning them about the upcoming murder of the best president they ever had. We do know that Lee Harvey Oswald was assassinated in the parking garage of Dallas Police Station by a man called Jack Rubenstein, although, for reasons best known to themselves, history records him as Jack Ruby. But he was never Jack Ruby. He was always Jack Rubenstein, a strip club owner that we now know from the release of the files today met with Lee Harvey Oswald only 2 weeks before the crime was committed. It was murder most foul, as Bob Dylan says. It was the beginning of the end of America, as I say. But it's not the only murder most foul that we've been watching and reading about this very week. We've got some cracking guests for you this evening, so you better stay tuned. This is the mother of all talk shows.
All the activists that have been making noise about what Israel is doing, the genocide. And so, it takes a world to make this happen, but thank God Trump is leading the pack. But my question to you is, can we celebrate? It seems like it's too soon to celebrate because we don't know, what's really going to happen. I just don't trust those Israelis. They say one thing and do another. Look what they're doing in Lebanon. So what is your level of optimism for this latest attempt at a ceasefire? And that's my main question. So I'll let you answer
well,
that.
At least 75%, Wendy, and cautious celebration. A non-alcoholic glass of champagne, perhaps. Actually, I recommend that in general, especially date champagne. Has anyone out there tasted date champagne made entirely from dates? And of course, non-alcoholic. It is superb. If I could get my hands on one of those this evening, which I definitely can't, I would be having a glass of that and quietly, cautiously celebrating. But you are absolutely right to say, God bless Jeffrey Sachs and all the other speakers and activists who have striven might and main in all weathers, in all countries, in all parts of the world to help bring about the atmosphere that has prevailed and has forced the American presidency to be changed, and for the American presidential policy towards the war to be changed. I'm in no doubt about this, why I mentioned them first. Trump is the reason there is a ceasefire. He is the reason. If Harris had won, there would have been no ceasefire. That's quite an achievement, before you've even got your feet in the presidential slippers.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Trump was the reason there was a ceasefire, and equally he is the reason why there now is not. I'm in a hotel room because a funny thing happened to me on the way to the studio. Our internet provision was dramatically cut less than 60 minutes before the beginning of this show. And so a great scramble to decamp to a hotel room with sufficiently high levels of internet had to be carried out, and I hope that the lack of normal facilities does not disable the show in any way. We've got a poll, as always. 5 years on, were the COVID lockdowns a mistake? Yes or no? You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. If you're watching on the YouTube stream, please share it with all of your friends, all of your contacts, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel and give the thumbs up to the show. It really does help us with Mr. Algorithm. It's a yes or no. 5 years on, were the COVID lockdowns a mistake? If you want to call the show, it's toll-free in the US and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. If you're in the UK or Ireland, it's free of charge, 0808 196 5522. And the worldwide number is 0044 203 966 2625. Now, Professor Syed Mohammed Marandi, Chair of American Studies at the University of Tehran, is every sensible person's authority on things that are happening in his part of the world, and indeed farther afield. And I'm very glad to say, on this very dramatic knife edge that we stand in the Persian Gulf, Professor Marandi has been able to join us. Professor, as always, an honor to talk with you. I spoke in my monologue about the savagery of the American attack on Yemen, but in truth, they've never stopped attacking Yemen for a very long time. And yet the Yemeni people remain in their millions, completely resolute. How do we account for that?
Well, it's a great honor being on your show, as always. I think it's obvious to everyone that Trump has made a major mistake. He doesn't have any special card up his sleeve that Biden did not have. He has the same weapons and the same destructive capabilities to murder women and children as Biden did. The arrogance of power, the arrogance of empire is what makes Americans constantly miscalculate, whether it was in Afghanistan or Iraq or elsewhere, or in Ukraine, as we see today. It is the arrogance of power that causes them to go in thinking that they're going to win this one because they are special and they're above and beyond the rest of us, and ultimately they fail and their empire weakens every time. And hopefully today we are witnessing the final days of this empire. The Ansarullah movement, which is, they're not the Houthis as they're often called. The Houthis is a tribe. Ansarullah is a national movement which includes Houthis and it includes others. And it has many allies in Yemen, and now it's a household name across the region. It is the heroic force that has stood up to the United States and to the Israelis, and which is alongside Hezbollah, has sacrificed to try to stop the genocide against another people, not their own, which I think is the ultimate sacrifice. But these people have fought against Saudi Arabia, their genocidal war alongside the Emiratis, this genocidal war that they carried out for 7 years against Yemen, with the support of the United States and the collective West. And they failed. And the Saudis spent hundreds of billions of dollars, not hundreds of millions, not billions, not tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars. And they're next door. So they were bombing day and night. They built up mercenary armies, and they failed. And they never took the capital, Sana'a. Why? Because Ansarullah is popular, because it is legitimate. It is not a proxy. Iran supports it. Iran is honored to support it, but they are independent, and they say that the Israeli regime, as long as it's carrying out a starvation siege, they will not allow its ships to pass through the Red Sea. They are enforcing the Genocide Convention. And what do they get in return? Instead of being thanked, the Americans and the British bombed them, and the Qatar, the Emirates, the Saudis, and Bahrain all facilitate the attack in order to bring them to their knees. But it's going to fail. It failed in the past, it will fail today, and it will fail in the weeks ahead. And I think we already see some signs, and I may be wrong, of Trump backing down, because he just wrote another message where he said the Iranians have now decreased their support. His previous rant was only 2 days ago. How could Iran decrease its support in 48 hours? So I think it's possible that he's recognized that this bombing campaign is not going to do any damage to the Ansarullah and Yemeni armed forces underground facilities. It's just murdering ordinary people, making Trump look as evil and sinister as Biden, and it is making Ansarullah more popular than ever before in the eyes of the people on the streets across the region.
I'll come back to these principalities that you referred to earlier in a minute, but I suppose the big enchilada is this. Is Trump and the UK, Starmer, I don't know what they do, whether they blow up the tires of the aircraft before they take off, or some other menial task, maybe work in the mess for the American pilots. But the US and UK, are they bombing Yemen as a proxy for bombing you, for bombing Iran? Is that Yemen's real crime? That so far, neither the British nor the Americans have the bottle to bomb Iran, so why not bomb its neighbor with whom it has close and friendly relations?
I think there are a couple of things here. One is, I think that the United States knows that in Ukraine it's going to lose, and that Russia has the upper hand, and that however this war ends in Ukraine, the West and the United States and NATO, they're all going to look weak. And Trump is going to be blamed. So Trump would like to look strong in Yemen. And also, in order to battle, let's say, the deep state and his opponents, whether in Europe or in the United States, who are going to, I think, increase the pressure, especially as the economy will continue to get worse, most probably, he does want the Zionist lobby on his side. That's how I see it. But I think in addition to that, the point you make is probably the most important point, and that is that bombing Yemen is the next best thing to bombing Iran. They can't bomb Iran because Iran can destroy the global economy. So they bomb Yemen instead. They murder Yemeni women and children in the hope that they can intimidate Iran, but also in the hope that the Zionist lobby, that they will be satisfied with Trump standing shoulder to shoulder with Netanyahu in the slaughter of the people of Gaza and in the slaughter of women and children in Yemen. I think the military, the US military, knows quite well that a war with Iran would mean the end of the global economy as we know it. The oil and gas assets and its installations in the Persian Gulf region, along with the petrochemical plants and the refineries, and all the other the desalination plants, all of these are vulnerable. The Persian Gulf is not very wide, and Iran owns one side of it. That's why it's called the Persian Gulf. If there is war, these tiny Arab family dictatorships on the other side that host US bases, they won't last. Many of them, like Qatar, only have like 350,000 passport holders. Most people there are foreigners. They're indentured servants at best, if not slaves. The same is true in the Emirates. So if there is war, these regimes will all collapse very swiftly, and the global economy will collapse. And that will be the end of the US empire. It will be the end of Trump's presidency. And imagine if the global economy collapses, which will be catastrophic for all of us. Imagine how many people will be on the move. The Americans complain about immigrants from Latin America, which largely go to the United States because of the damage that the United States did to Latin America over the decades. Imagine if the economy collapses across the world, people in Latin America will be streaming to North America in much greater numbers than we see today. And the same is true in Europe. People from Africa and West Asia will be moving towards Europe like a flood, in far greater numbers than today, even though the economies of North America and Europe will also collapse. But people will be moving to where they think there may be hope. So it's mind-boggling, I think, what would happen if there's a war. And I think there are enough sane people in the Pentagon, sinister but sane, who would tell the president that this is simply a bridge too far. However, it's not impossible for there to be a war because you have the Zionist lobby and you have Netanyahu, whose personal interest is in war. Netanyahu has really destroyed the Israeli regime. He's exposed it to the world through his brutality and the brutality of the regime. The biggest loser in these 18 months is the Israeli regime because it's been shown to the world as morally illegitimate. But Netanyahu himself is a winner because he's been able to survive and stay in power because of these wars. So he is interested in expanding the war. But so far, I think probably the people in the Pentagon would have the upper hand and be telling Trump that war with Iran would be utterly disastrous.
Well, I was going to return to the principalities, but I think you've dealt quite comprehensively with them. So let me turn to Gaza. The ground invasion, albeit a pinpoint ground invasion, rather like the limited invasion of Rafah that you'll recall from last year, has begun. What's that all about in your point of view?
I think the very fact that we've had 18 months of genocide, with the exception of a brief break, where even during these 2 months where we had a so-called ceasefire, on average, 3 Palestinians a day were being murdered in the Gaza Strip, and the ethnic cleansing and murder in the West Bank increased dramatically. And we also had a murder a day in Lebanon. So this was never really a ceasefire. But except for these couple of months that it's been more quiet, the Israeli regime has been carrying out genocide basically because Netanyahu needs war. And so he cannot stop the war. He is going to have to constantly expand the war, enter Gaza, bomb Gaza, in order to satisfy his partners in government, his fanatical religious Zionists, in order to stay in power. And he has had success. You see the head of Shin Bet is now out. He's gotten his way. He's becoming more like the emperor of Israel. And the more secular, liberal Zionists, who are just as genocidal towards the Palestinians, they are very unhappy. And the divide in Israel and among the people who live in that regime, the divide is extraordinarily great, and some believe it can become deadly. So he needs to keep pushing. But I do not see the regime succeeding in Gaza, just as I do not see the United States succeeding in Yemen. They will only continue to slaughter more people, and they will become more despised. And George, I really think that in a way, restarting a Holocaust is even worse than continuing a Holocaust. For well over a year, people like yourself and others have been active to create awareness. But after a period of time, after months of seeing dead children and beheaded babies, it becomes normalized. But when the so-called ceasefire took effect, the international community took a collective sigh of relief. Even though, as I said, they were still killing people. But now when Netanyahu restarts this genocide, people are stunned and shocked. And especially in one day, he slaughtered over 400 people, almost 200 of them children. This angers people. It intensifies the animosity towards the Israeli regime. This, I think, is a huge mistake. It is evil, utterly evil, but it is also extremely damaging for the regime. I continue to believe that the Israeli regime is in its final stage of existence. I'm not saying it's going to end tomorrow or next week or next month or next year, but it has been exposed to the world for what it is, and those powers that lie behind it have been discredited, and they continue to decline in power. These are dark days, but I believe that in the future we will see light at the end of the tunnel.
Finally, you are, of course, the chair of American Studies at the University of Tehran. Let me take advantage of that. You are a man of many parts. Did you have time to look at the JFK files that were released today, if indeed they were released? I've described it as looking for a needle in a haystack from which the needle has been removed. I'm wondering if you have any of the same feelings.
Yes, it is like looking for a needle in the haystack, and indeed the needle has been removed. But I think those who've been looking and those who understand a thing or two, they know exactly what it was that has been removed. And I think the very fact that it has been removed says more than enough. It says enough about what happened in the past, and it shows enough about us and a great deal about what the United States is today. The same is true with the Epstein files. At the end of the day, a lot of it will be redacted, but people will know enough. Those who want to know, those who want to open their eyes, they will see the truth. Just like in Syria, those who want to open their eyes to the reality of ISIS and Al-Qaeda and that this was an American operation will understand it. Those who want to close their eyes and continue with their sectarian hatred, they will keep their eyes closed. Those Americans or Europeans who want to believe that the Western political establishment is the free world and that they're the most civilized of all of us, they can continue to close their eyes. But the rest of us in the West and the rest of those in Europe and the United States, they know that that needle is missing from the haystack, and they know with the Epstein files, they will not find that needle when those files are released either.
You're a star. Thank you very much again, Professor Said Mohammed Marandi, Chair of the American Studies Department at the University of Iran. 5 years on, were the COVID lockdowns a mistake? Answer yes, no, on Telegram, on X, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. 20,000 of you have voted already, and a pretty healthy majority of you say yes, they were indeed a mistake. Let me take a quick break, then it's your calls taking us right up to the hour. Stay tuned, it's the mother of all those. Big thanks to this week's top donors who visited the new MOATS.tv website. Thank you very much, all of you. And I'm really going to make this point as firmly as I can. Every one of you has to go to MOATS.tv and donate something, even if it is £1, even if it is $1, €1. Nothing comes for free. 2 shows a week cannot be produced for free. We need every person watching to donate at least £1, $1, €1. I can't put it more clearly than that.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Let's go straight to New York, where John is on the line on Yemen. Go ahead, John.
Hi, George. This is John in New York, a proud student at university, currently paying tuition on Patreon.
Thank you
question
very
is-
much indeed, John.
My question is, obviously, I mean, I cannot believe the corporate news sources here in my country, particularly about Yemen. And I don't know, and I'm somewhat ignorant on this, but of course, people like, I mean, obviously our president, and by the way, I did not, you are 1,000% correct. It is not Israel first that I voted for. But my question is, how can I gauge the popularity of the Houthis? Because like everything else, it's deemed a terrorist organization. The Palestinians are victims of Hamas, and the Yemeni people are victims of Houthis. And I was wondering if you could enlighten me on, as far as you know, what is the popularity of a group like the Houthis amongst the populace of the country? Thank you.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that. In part, I'll build on what Professor Marandi said. I'll try not to repeat him, but as it happens, I'm not at all ignorant about the Yemen. I have been following events in the country for longer than I'd care to mention. One of my first and most vivid memories are kilted and bagpiping Scottish soldiers murdering Yemenis in the Crater district of Aden in the 1960s, when the Beatles were top of the hit parade. Scottish soldiers were gunning down Yemenis, and we've been gunning them down virtually ever since. So I have quite a deep and intimate knowledge of the Yemen and of the people of the Yemen. First of all, they're not Houthis. As Professor Marandi said, that's like calling any liberation movement after the name of one family. It would be like saying, instead of saying the ANC, African National Congress, the Mandelas. That's how stupid it is. The Houthi family, tribe really, are a big and important part of Ansar Allah, which in Arabic means the army of God. But they are by no means the only component of the national movement. There are communists in the national movement. There are Nasserists in the national movement. There are Baathists. There are people of all political stripes. They are not homogenic, and they're not the Houthis. They are the Yemeni people, or their liberation movement, the Ansar Allah, and the Houthi family or tribe are merely an important component part of them. As for how popular they are, I commend to you the demonstrations which take place in the capital, Sana'a, every Friday. It's not AI. These are actual aerial photographs of the largest demonstrations you will find anywhere in the globe. And they take place on the streets of the capital of Yemen, in support of the stand taken against the Israeli genocide by the government of the Ansar Allah. Neither are they Shiites. Another of the attempts to calumnify them, as if being a Shiite was some kind of calumny, but they want to turn it into a sectarian conflict, so they call them Shiites, but none of them are Shiites. The Yemeni people follow a current in Islam called the Zaydi. They are all Zaydis. They are communist Zaydis or Islamist Zaydis. They are Baathist or Nasserist Zaydis, or they are communist Zaydis, or you get my point, I hope. They attempt to make the Sunni Muslim world hate or look down on the Yemenis is surely doomed because of the reason why the Americans and the British are attacking them. After all, how could you support, for any reason, sectarian or otherwise, an attack on people who are trying to stop Israeli ships or ships going to or from Israel in protest against the genocide of your Sunni Arab brothers, sisters, and their children? How could you be against that? What kind of Muslim would be against that? Now, how popular they are? Well, they appear in front of millions every Friday in downtown Sana'a, and their rivals, the so-called internationally recognized government, a bit like the one in Libya, is no government at all, with no territory at all. It actually operates out of a hotel suite in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. That's where the so-called internationally recognized government of Yemen are to be found. So there are two parties to the political conflict in Yemen. There have been for the last decade, but one of them is in power and fighting back, and the other is supping non-alcoholic, I'm sure, cocktails in a hotel suite in Saudi Arabia. So I'm in no doubt where the Yemeni people are. I have known them for a very long time, for many decades. You really couldn't find more honorable people than the Yemeni people. You certainly will not find more pure people than the Yemeni people. The purest in religious terms, the purest version of the Arabic language. They speak the most important and best version of the Arabic language. They love their country and they love their religion. And that makes them unbeatable, really. If Saudi Arabia, acting as a proxy for the Western countries, and the Emirates, never forget the role of the Emirates in this, if they couldn't beat the Yemeni people next door, then Donald Trump's aircraft carriers, which, by the way, are sitting ducks. I really say to President Trump, in all sincerity, you need to withdraw your aircraft carriers from the Red Sea because they are sitting ducks. And the Ansar Allah can destroy them any moment that they like. They know that that would be a big escalation, but a big escalation cannot be ruled out. My computer's gone off, so I can't read what I'm supposed to do next or who's coming up next. Let me go to my old friend Terence in Corby. He's always worth hearing. What have you got for us, Tel?
Good evening, Mr. Galloway, and it's a pleasure to hear Professor Muhammad Marandi. And him and I think the same. Oh, fantastic. And him and I think along the same lines academically. We need facts. And the one fact I wanted to put to you today, in my opinion, is that I never saw a ceasefire from the genocide. I never saw it as anything other than a hiatus, i.e. Trump serving his Zionist friends, making more bombs, making them richer, getting ready for whatever he may think. Whatever he thinks doesn't matter. I think the Pentagon has got him where they want him as of a lot of other people. However, I really think that he's spoiling for Biff with the wrong people. He picks on Persia. That's the end of Israel. He picks on Persia. Yemen are doing a great job. I like to say, as God is in my heart, I pray for them. I pray for them on a decade of the Rosary, and they're doing great work, standing up for what is right. But I've never thought that Trump called for a ceasefire. He's called for a hiatus, and he's got it to make more money to keep his backers wealthy. What say you, Mr. Galloway?
I don't entirely agree, although I fully understand how you've come to that conclusion, and right now you're looking more correct than me. I happen to believe that Trump wanted a ceasefire. I happen to believe that he would have been happier if a ceasefire had continued, not least because he has multiple problems at home and abroad already, bringing about an end to the Ukraine war, bringing Zelensky to heel is turning out to be a much more complicated business than he certainly thought when he was on the campaign trail. He could not have reckoned on the poodle in Paris and the chihuahua posing as a bulldog in London would cause him so much difficulty in getting his way and emboldening the chihuahua Zelensky into thinking that he can continue the war against the will of the United States, which has paid for the greater part of it so far in weapons and in money. So I happen to think that Trump would have preferred the ceasefire to continue, but for some reason, we can only speculate about which, Netanyahu has got the United States political class, including the White House, over a barrel. Now, whether that's cash or compromat or both, I don't know. I'm not close enough to the scene of the action, at least not yet, to properly evaluate that. But one thing's for sure. When Netanyahu shared with the White House his intentions of the last 72 hours, it's clear that Trump was in no position, for one reason or another, to tell him no. Thank you, Terence, for an excellent call. Now, you can scan the QR code if you're watching on the YouTube stream and send in comments. Arcane Eclectic, one of my favorite names, says Yemen is the only honorable country in the entire Middle East. And Rentier Oligarch says we gave the ginger war pig a chance. It turned out as expected. And Jack Klugman, another great name, have you met an evangelical troglodyte from Georgia or Alabama? GG. It's like a Neanderthal regression. I've not had that pleasure yet, but as we hope to be in the US, not too far distant, I'll look out for them. Abu Swalhe Musafir says heroism belongs to the Yemenis. The cowards are Israel, USA, and the Western leaders. Saudi Arabia is just as hypocritical as Qatar, UAE, Egypt, and Jordan. TB says attacking the weakest countries is a way for the West to instill fear and bully the rest of the world. Fair point, TB, but what if the weakest country, Yemen, is able to deliver some very powerful punches back? That might not work out the way they intended. Josh is in California on Trump and Kennedy. Go ahead, Josh.
Hi, George. You made reference earlier to Kennedy and Trump's achievements, and I kind of take issue with that characterization of the changes that occurred during either's administration. The opportunities for peace are typically not created. The opportunities for peace are typically not created expressly by American presidents, but by other parties, be they the Cubans, the Palestinians, Martin Luther King Jr. and the American Civil Rights Movement, or the Russians, etc. And those opportunities are delivered through organized struggle against not only the President of the United States, but in fact the United States itself, both as a country and as a society. The necessary conciliatory gestures any politician has to make throughout their career, both abroad and at home, due to the backlash to their worst decisions, is what drives change, gives change an open lane. Not the belligerence of limit-testing brats, learn those limits, though they may. Now, the holding up of the Gaza ceasefire for 6 months to help Trump win the election and help improve his image after the fact, only to turn around and throw it away in pursuit of a broader regional escalation, is one of the most obvious and egregious examples of political contrivance I've ever seen in my life. And though I don't expressly blame Trump for that, he certainly was participatory. Now, major policy changes are necessary here in the United States, and I know that Trump recognizes that. I wish I were more certain that he recognizes exactly which changes need to be made and how urgent it is.
Well, me too. I think you've created, if I may say so, a bit of a straw man to knock down, because as has just been demonstrated, we don't have a particularly oppositional point of view, you and I. And I'm familiar with your worldview. I've been listening to it for more than 50 years. But the attempt to say that presidents and leaders have no role in moments of extreme danger in the world is killed stone dead by the negotiated end to the Cuban Missile Crisis, which would not have been the same end if Jack Kennedy had not been the one sitting in the Oval Office. That much is abundantly clear to all historians. Curtis LeMay and all the Dr. Strangeloves in the Pentagon, the CIA, the Angletons, the Hoovers, all of the worst cutthroat murderers wanted a war over the Cuban Missile Crisis. And Jack Kennedy did not. And he therefore ably negotiated an end to the crisis, which gave something to both parties. The withdrawal of Soviet nuclear weapons from Cuba, and the withdrawal, though unannounced for many decades later, of US nuclear weapons in Turkey, in the NATO base at Incirlik. So Jack Kennedy, if he did nothing else, and he did do other things, saved the world from a nuclear exchange over Cuba. And he did it because of the man that he was, and because of the moral position that he had. Ditto the attempt to haul over the coals the Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion for breaching the non-proliferation agreements in place at that time and acquiring illegally the material that later became at Dimona hundreds of Israeli nuclear weapons. Kennedy was against that. He stood against that. Not because there was some mass struggle going on in the United States that forced him to, but because of who he was. I know you don't like the idea that there can be great men in history. It goes against your worldview. But great men do, from time to time, sadly too infrequently, come along and play a role that can be decisive. Now, a big thanks to this week's top donors who visited the new MOATS.tv website, which is a must. You've all got to visit it, and you've all got at least $1, or you're having a free ride here. And we will not be able to continue 2 shows a week if people don't step up. But Robin Walker stepped up, so did Syed Bukhari, so did Todd Menzing and Samik Sen, and Tufan. I can't read your second name, it's disappeared off the edge of my screen. But Tufan, I'm saying thank you to you above all because I couldn't read your second name. Barhak, Tufan Barhak, Todd Menzing and Samik Sen. Thank you very much indeed for your generosity. So please become a donor tonight. Go to moats.tv after the show. 21,335 of you have voted already. 5 years on, well, the COVID lockdown's a mistake, yes or no, and you've got about 40 minutes so to vote. Well, after a quick break, have we got a guest for you? It's Larry Johnson, a man who, shall I say, is no stranger to the American deep state. And he can tell us what's going down over JFK and the Persian Gulf right after this short break. Stay tuned.
The 1897 edition of War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. Read by George Galloway. Available only on Patreon.
The cylinder was artificial, hollow, with an end that screwed out. Something within the cylinder was unscrewing the top. Good heavens, said Ogilvy. There's a man in it, men in it, half roasted to death, trying to escape. At once, with a quick mental leap, he linked the thing with the flash on Mars. The thought of the confined creature was so dreadful to him that he forgot the heat and went forward to the cylinder to help turn. But luckily, the dull radiation arrested him before he could burn his hands on the still glowing metal.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, as I said, Larry Johnson, a veteran of the CIA and the State Department's Office of Counter-Terrorism and the founder of Berg Associates, will be coming up very shortly indeed. And what a night for him to be our guest. But first, there's a No Conscription League meeting. Indeed, their very first meeting will be tomorrow night. It will be on air. Of course, it'll be on my channel, I think. There is no to conscription, no British troops in Ukraine. It will be chaired by my colleague, Uncle Hoz, Hussein Shafiei, and ex-serviceman Mick Stott, ex-ambassador Peter Ford, and very much still a top journalist, Warren Thornton, will be the three speakers at 9 p.m. London time on their platform and on mine on YouTube. So let me go to, have we got any more donations? We're going straight to Larry, I'm glad to say. I can't tell you exactly where he is. If I did, I'd have to kill you. But he's somewhere deep underground in Washington, I'm sure, poring over the 80,000 pages, Larry, of the JFK files. I've described it tonight as looking for a needle in a haystack from which the needle has been removed. Although, as Professor Marandi just said, it's not hard to guess why the needle was removed and where it might now be located. How do you see it?
Well, getting access to the files, it's posted online, but it's a challenge. Look, I think the key to this, the best explanation I've seen over the years, is that it has been presented by Ryan Dawson. The connection to Israel in this incident is quite strong. So the fact that Jackruby assassinates Lee Harvey Oswald was not just a coincidence. He wasn't just somebody who really loved Jack Kennedy and wanted to take out his suspected murderer. Ruby was part of a mafia group, and it was not just, he was connected both to the Italian mob and the Jewish mob, being Jewish himself. And the entire motive behind this was that Kennedy was pressing Israel to divulge the fact that it had stolen uranium from the United States in order to build its first nuclear weapon. On top of that, 30 days before Kennedy was killed, his brother Robert F. Kennedy Jr., or Robert F. Kennedy, had sent a letter of intent to the Zionist Organization of America, notifying them that they'd be required to register as a foreign agent. After JFK's death, that never happened. And today we have something called AIPAC, American Israeli Public Affairs Committee, which basically owns the U.S. government. So what's interesting is reporters that I believe have strong Zionist ties, like David Korn, have published a book in which he insists that it was Lee Harvey Oswald, the lone gunman. I think one of the things we'll find out of these files is the fact that Lee Harvey Oswald was part of a program that was being run by James Jesus Angleton, the CIA spook who was in charge of counterintelligence at the Central Intelligence Agency. Because here's Oswald at the ripe old age of 17, joins the Marine Corps. 2 years later, he gets a hardship discharge, ostensibly to take care of his mother. But during that time, he became known as, as a Soviet-loving Marine. And then upon being discharged, instead of going home to take care of his supposedly ill mother, hops a ship, sails to Moscow, or sails to Russia, and ends up staying there for approximately 2 years. Comes back disappointed, but then continues to seek getting a visa out of the Russian embassy in Mexico. He was in my view, fully under the control of the CIA at the time, and which calls into question what exactly was the CIA's full role in the death of JFK. That I don't think we're going to discover out of these files, unfortunately.
I certainly haven't found anything that I didn't know already, but then I suppose I'm 79,000 pages still to go. But looking at commentators and listening to such an eminent commentator as you, I'm wondering if it's worth plowing on. Not many people believe there was only one shooter. Not many people believe that the silencing of Oswald by Rubenstein, to give him his Saturday name, was an accident. Not many people believe that the United States deep state was without involvement of some kind. And now not many people will believe that Israel did not have, at the very least, a very close interest in what was going to happen. Therefore, we're not much further forward, because I could have said all of that to you last Wednesday, never mind tonight. But the one thing that struck me as interesting is the evidence that Russia warned the United States about Oswald's intention to murder the president. That much I did read today. Now, that would square with what happened on 9/11 also, when Russia again warned of what might happen, or something big going to happen on 9/11. Why wouldn't the U.S. have listened to these warnings?
Oh, well, we've got a long history of not listening to Russia's warnings. Remember, it was I believe it was the summer of 1944, in July, when the Soviet troops stumbled across the extermination camp Majdanek and warned Great Britain, warned Washington that the Nazis were engaged in mass extermination. And everybody ignored it, dismissed it. So and remember also the Tsarnaev brothers, the bombers of the Boston Marathon, more than 12 years ago now. They were, again, Russia warned the FBI. They ignored the warnings. So at least we can give the United States credit for being consistent.
Consistently stupid in ignoring warnings because of who's giving them the warnings. I watched that Boston Marathon documentary just the other day, and it's simply beyond dispute that Russia warned that the elder of these two brothers was an extremist fanatic bent on terrorism. And yet nobody picked him up. They gave him a cursory glance and then let him go free. And a lot of people lost their lives and limbs as a result. Let's turn, if we may, Larry, to the even bigger picture than an assassination so long ago as the Kennedy assassination, and talk about the people Donald Trump's been assassinating this week. He assassinated, along with his British auxiliary, a lot of people in the Yemen, and he must now be held co-responsible for the murder of 463 people in the Gaza Strip. What on earth is in all of that for America?
Yeah, America is facilitating terrorism. There's no doubt about that, with terrorism defined by Bibi Netanyahu, of all people, on a television show with William F. Buckley in the 1980s, where he said it's the use of violence against civilians for political purposes. Well, there you go. I think, unfortunately, that Trump and his team have made the decision to attack Iran. They used their initial bombing of Yemen on Saturday, the Ides of March, as, I think, laying the predicate so that they could justify going after Iran, accusing Iran of supporting the Houthis and giving them advanced missiles, but refusing to acknowledge the fact that since the declaration of the ceasefire in January, the Houthis had abided by that ceasefire, had not attacked any more ships, were effectively allowing freedom of navigation. And yet on the 15th, unprovoked, the United States launched this attack on the Yemenis, on the Houthis in particular, and killed women and children. They didn't kill and destroy missile sites. And so this was, in response to this, the Houthis are going to retaliate. And as they retaliate, the United States will then say, see, this is the fault of Iran. And what I thought would not be possible is definitely, I think, a high likelihood within the next month or two that the United States is going to launch an attack on Iran and will live to regret it.
Yeah, I mean, it was a day that will live in infamy, and appropriately it was on the Ides of March. But it's nothing compared to what will happen if the balloon goes up, Larry. I've just been talking to Professor Marandi, who reminded us all over again of Iran's potential capability to effectively bring about the end of the industrial economies of the world. It can level the entire oil, gas, refinery, and shipping lanes. It can wipe them all out in an afternoon. Anybody that's got expensive apartment in Dubai can kiss it goodbye if that happens. Dubai will not exist if that happens, and neither will the American bases in the region, and neither will the oil and gas facilities in Qatar, in Abu Dhabi, in Saudi Arabia. They'll all be taken out, and never mind $10 a barrel for gas, Larry, there will be no gas available anywhere. Not a wheel will turn anywhere in the Western world. That's a pretty high price to pay for an alliance with Netanyahu, isn't it?
Yeah. This is sheer madness. And they're neglecting to take into account that Iran and Russia signed a security agreement on the 17th of January, 3 days before Donald Trump took office. Well, that was, I think, Vladimir Putin deliberately chose that day. Now, what Putin and the Russians tried to do was, in signing that agreement, provide the United States with, if you will, evidence that Iran's not trying to acquire a nuclear weapon, because Russia is now involved with the nuclear program in Iran, and Russia traditionally is not one who's going to promote the proliferation of weapons. Let's also remember that probably, I think it was last week, marked the end of the 7th Joint Naval Military Exercise between or among Russia, China, and Iran. So an attack, if the United States decides to attack Iran and Iran's going to retaliate, it doesn't only risk the devastation that you've described, but it also carries with it the risk that this could bring Russia and even China into the fray. And then we're really talking about a global conflagration. So this is, on the part of Donald Trump, this is beyond malpractice. This is just madness.
And yet it seems to contradict the efforts that he seems to be making to obviate that kind of cataclysm on the Ukraine track. How do we square this apparent contradiction?
Well, he's talking nice words. That's reassuring, but he's still not listening to what the Russians are saying. I had the privilege a week ago of sitting across the table from Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, along with Judge Napolitano and Mario Naval. And I asked the foreign minister directly that in June of 2024, President Putin laid out very clearly Russia's position on what would be required of Ukraine before Russia would even entertain any kind of significant peace process. And the Foreign Minister Lavrov emphasized that those conditions still hold, that hasn't changed. Well, the United States keeps thinking that it can somehow coerce, bully, threaten Russia into a 30-day ceasefire all across the front. Russia's not about to succumb to that. They did agree in the conversation yesterday to suspend attacks on energy facilities and energy infrastructure. Now, Trump comes away touting that as a great victory. Well, think of it this way. You had a house with 11 windows, and the fellow standing outside has shut out 10 of the windows. And so he says, hey, I'm going to call a ceasefire because you only got one window left anyway. That's the situation Ukraine is in. Russia has decimated the energy sector in Ukraine. There's not really a lot more damage they could do. So it's easy for them to say, okay, we won't do anything else for another 30 days. But what we see are continued attacks from Ukraine. And one of the conditions Vladimir Putin laid out in 2024 in June and repeated yesterday to Donald Trump, end all military and intelligence assistance to Ukraine now. End it now. And Trump continues to play with fire and continues to allow that assistance to be provided. And as long as that is happening, the United States is a facilitator of murder. We are helping Ukraine commit war crimes. And until we stop, this war is going to continue, and Russia is going to come out on top as the victor.
We don't even have John Bolton to blame.
Yes.
Who is feeding President Trump this contradictory and woefully insufficient intelligence? Is it little Marco Rubio? Who's got their finger on his auto pen?
Yeah, I suspect it's not just one individual. It's the collection. Trump has surrounded himself with, I'll call it a collection of dwarfs. Think of him as the ugly Snow White and with the seven dwarfs. But, we do have Goofy and Dopey, even though Goofy was not one of the original seven dwarfs. But he has embraced this concept that is widespread in the intelligence community, that Russia's economy is weak and on the brink of collapse. If we just push it, put a little more pressure, they'll collapse, and that they've suffered massive casualties. Now, all of that is not true, but trying to convey that truth to people with their minds already made up is almost mission impossible.
Now, you mentioned your meeting with Foreign Minister Lavrov. I've met him myself 2 times, maybe 3 times actually. is undoubtedly the real heir to the throne so far as foreign ministers are concerned. He's the doyen of foreign ministers in the world. Nobody could seriously doubt that. What did you take from that meeting about the current state of morale, determination, clear-headedness of the Russian leadership?
That the Russians understand clearly that the United States and the West is not their friend. I think that they want to handle the relationship like someone who has been in an abusive relationship with a spouse, and have tried over and over again to reestablish that relationship. And every time the abusive spouse is either guilty of cheating or physical violence or bullying, some combination. And at some point you say, okay, I've tried this 3 times, I've tried this 4 times. And each time you keep doing the same thing, we're going to separate. We may come across each other, I'll be cordial to you, but we're not going to be in any kind of romantic relationship. We're not going to have any kind of close tie. And I think that's where Russia is right now with the West. They recognize that the West is incorrigible, that the United States, no matter what promises Donald Trump makes, no matter what assurances are given verbally, that there is no way that Russia can count on those assurances, that they will be betrayed. And so to that end, Russia is going to take steps. And Vladimir Putin emphasized this yesterday in his speech that he delivered to the industrialists, I guess it was called the Council of Industrialists, which was just before his speech, his conversation with Donald Trump. And then he emphasized, look, he says, the West is going to continue to bully us and threaten us and try to sanction us and try to use economic leverage. We have to recognize it's always going to be there, and we're going to have to chart an independent course, a course outside of that, so that the U.S. can do what it wants economically, but we're not going to be held hostage or captive to that. And so that's what I came away with, that, this is not just Lavrov's view. This is not just the view of Maria Zakharova. This is the view across the board of Vladimir Putin, of the Foreign Ministry, of the General Staff, of the Security Council. They understand the West is not to be trusted, and therefore Russia is going to always take measures to preserve its security first and foremost.
I mean, we were lucky during the Cuban Missile Crisis that the United States was led by Jack Kennedy. The world is lucky that Russia, in the face of extreme provocation from Western countries, first Joe Biden, but now ably succeeded by the European Union barking dogs, the Russians have kept a pretty level head, just like Kennedy did over Cuba.
Yes. Yeah, they're not at all emotional about it. And I think, frankly, there was a time, maybe, going back to 1854, 53, in the Crimea War, when you could label France and the United Kingdom as the equivalent of a Great Dane, a large dog, a powerful dog. Well, today, the combination of the two, and it's no insult to the people of Britain or France, but, frankly, they're like an old toy poodle with no teeth. They make a big noise. They can create a mess on the carpet. But apart from being annoying, they don't represent any kind of serious threat. And frankly, the Russians don't take them seriously. It's like a fly flying around their head, something to be annoyed and swatted away.
Larry Johnson, as always, a privilege to talk with you. Thanks for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. Now the telephone calls next all the way to the hour, because there's no Gayatri social media roundup tonight. because, well, frankly, we're not in a studio. So please forgive us for that. So we'll take calls all the way right after this very short break. Stay tuned. Well, first of all, Bob Geldof and his good friend Bono are on the other side. It wasn't for South Africa, it was for the Horn of Africa. I was involved in it at the time. That was my job at the time. And there were many differences. First of all, it was easy because of Cold War politics to take a stand on the famine in sub-Saharan Africa in 1984-85. I did so myself, but it was easy to do. There was no Ethiopian lobby smearing you as an anti-Ethiopian racist if you got involved in it. There was absolutely gale force wind of free publicity from the newspapers and the television about the famine in Africa at that time. There is zero publicity in the mainstream media about the calvary being undergone by the Palestinian people in 2024. Thirdly, the artists involved lost nothing and arguably gained much by being involved in that charitable enterprise. Artists today lining up for Palestine, like the great Eric Clapton, like the great Roger Waters, and I'm running out of names already, would not only not be benefiting from putting on a Live Aid for Palestine, their careers would be destroyed, would be brought to a shuddering halt if they did. So I'm afraid none of the conditions which made possible the Live Aid phenomenon exist over Palestine. Indeed, quite the contrary.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Ten minutes left to vote. 5 years on, were the COVID lockdowns a mistake? Yes or no? Now, on the line from Salford in Greater Manchester, we've got Paul on the Ukraine. Paul, go ahead. What would you want to say?
Good evening, sir. Thank you very much for having me on.
Good evening.
Yes,
Welcome.
I think President Putin should go all the way now, and he will become, him and his brave soldiers will become victorious, I'm sure. They are a great nation. They're renowned for being brilliant chess players throughout history, and I'm sure they will be victorious. And just before I go, you know, the most beautiful thing is the Russian national anthem. It's a really beautiful national anthem. What's your opinion, sir?
Well, yes to all of that. I hope to be at the Victory Parade in Moscow in May, commemorating the 81st anniversary of the Red Army's defeat of fascism and crushing Hitler in the rubble in his lair. It is, as you'll certainly be aware, but most viewers should be aware, an event of the greatest significance in Russian life. And once upon a time, it was an event of great significance in the lives of all of us. Who now, other than me in Britain, talks about the Second World War, even though the outcome of the Second World War continues to shape the world that we live in today, 81 years after it finished. Nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about our finest hour, the last of our heroes of the Royal Air Force Battle of Britain, died yesterday and is commemorated only on social media today. I haven't seen any other snakestream media coverage of the death of, at the age of 105, the last of the few. Who remembers the few? Who remembers that it was our finest hour? Who remembers the men of the Atlantic convoys? Eddie Lloyden, a parliamentary friend of mine, was one of them. God rest their souls. These men who sailed across the Atlantic in the worst possible conditions, under fire, under attack, from the air, from Ubs, in order to supply the Russian front with whatever material could be spared them. The men of the Atlantic convoys, sailing many cases out of Liverpool, were great unsung heroes of the war. Who even knows what I'm talking about now? Because we'd rather talk about little Zelensky than talk about the death of the last of the few, the last of the pilots, on whose shoulders at such tender ages, 19, 20, 21, the entire future of our country and of humanity turned. If the Luftwaffe had gained air superiority in the summer of 1941, we would have succumbed to Nazi invasion. It's all that stood between us and me speaking to you tonight in German, and the Second World War being over before the Americans or the Soviet Union even joined it. So who thinks about these things? Well, the Russians all do. Virtually every family in the whole of the former Soviet Union has a family member whose picture they bring on the parade to show that they have not forgotten or forgiven. And I see that Anna Baerbock is headed for New York now that she's no longer to be the foreign minister of Germany. She's going to be the president of the United Nations General Assembly. Well, it'll do wonders for her sex life being in New York, I'm sure. If you don't know what I mean, she certainly does. So a big shout out to the donors tonight. Mirza Beg, thank you Mirza. Ahmed, Selikel, William Herman, Firaz Sawalha, Christian Lapp, and Bibi Ali. A big thank you to all of you. In fact, a salute to all of you. These are tonight's top donors, but you can be a middle ranking or even a low ranking donor just by giving £1, €1, $1 on the website by clicking a button. That's all. Please. I shouldn't say please. He told me to stop saying please. If you don't want the show, don't give, and we'll have to cancel one of the shows. Why am I begging you for money? Damien in Brighton is on the line about Israel. Damien, welcome back. What do you want to say?
Good evening, George. George, I believe that the Yemeni Armed Forces ballistic missile attack on Israel's Nevatim air base and its threat to escalate its attacks if Israel doesn't stop its genocide of the Palestinians are highly significant. May I explain why I hold that view?
Please do.
Thank you. A former Israeli general has revealed that 40,000 IDF troops have been killed or injured in Gaza, which represents 25% of the IDF's total active forces. Thousands of IDF reservists are refusing to return to duty, and this week several IDF officers refused to serve. One of them called Benjamin Netanyahu a filthy traitor. At the same time, there are reports from America that so many people are volunteering to join Hamas that it has at least as many fighters as it had when Israel began the genocide. So the IDF's ground forces are significantly diminished and demoralized, while its enemy is fully replenished and motivated. And that's why I think the attack on Israel's airbase is so important, George, because the IDF's American F-35 warplanes are Israel's most powerful strike force. They are dropping American bombs on Palestinian civilians. And, of course, we should remember that Keir Starmer is supplying vital components for those warplanes. If the airbase is destroyed, it will leave the IDF unable to call for immediate air support. And at the same time as this is all happening, America's proxy war in Ukraine has depleted America's missile stocks, and they're unable to manufacture them at a fast enough rate to replenish those stocks, which means that Iran has missile superiority. So my summary, George, is that I think the idea that America and Israel are invincible is pure propaganda, and they're actually very vulnerable at the moment. And I think that Trump and Netanyahu would be very well advised not to test that thesis, because they could be facing a very large-scale Battle of Mogadishu if they do, and they should instead honour the Gaza ceasefire and the Lebanon ceasefire agreements that they freely entered into, and they should keep their word. And that's all I have to say, George.
Well, you say that's all you have to say, but you said it so well, it speaks volumes, and will have rung true with many in our audience tonight and in the days to come. 4.1 million people in the previous 7 days, previous to tonight. It was absolutely accurate. The phrase you used is the first time I think it's been used on here, of Iran having missile superiority. It does. Iran has missile superiority over Israel, and Israel's only superiority is its nuclear weapons. Now let's ponder for a moment an Israeli use of nuclear weapons. First of all, it would have to get American permission to use them. But assuming that was no problem, then what would be the impact of those nuclear weapons? If Israel fired nuclear weapons at Iran, Iran would reply with non-nuclear missiles, one presumes, unless they've been lying and they've actually got a nuclear weapon, in which case they'll respond with a nuclear attack on Israel, and then it's good night, Irene, for everybody in Israel, whether they are Israelis or Palestinians living under occupation by Israel. But let's assume for a moment that Iran has no nuclear weapons and Israel fires nuclear weapons at Iran. Well, first of all, the nuclear weapons and the fallout is no respecter of national boundaries. So all of the countries around Iran would be affected to a devastating degree by any Israeli use of nuclear weapons. And those countries are all American slave states. So the United States is going to have to be prepared to sign the death warrant of Saudis and Qataris and Emiratis and perhaps others. Are they really going to do that? Well, that's what they are risking. So I'm wondering, again, it's perfectly possible that I'm being over-optimistic. I have been before. I think that the United States is beating up Yemen as a substitute for beating up Iran, precisely because it knows the consequences of trying to beat up Iran. But Larry Johnson, a man who knows a lot, told us on the show tonight, just a few minutes ago, that he believes that the U.S. is a war with Iran. And if he's right, then I'm afraid we are all of us, in very deep trouble. Thank you, Damien, in Brighton, for an outstanding call. Now, our podcast is doing great guns. We're in the top 30 in Mexico, Morocco, and Ireland this week. You can download the MOATS podcast by scanning the QR code on the corner of the screen now. But you can also, of course, listen to the podcast on our website, moats.tv. Let's go to Canada on the lockdowns, and RB, who's always got interesting things to say. RB, welcome back. What do you want to say, sir?
Oh, hello, George. I hope I'm coming in clearly. I'm on the road to Big River to load a load of lumber.
Yeah, very clear. Very clear. Go ahead.
Very good. I'm stopped at the side of the road. So as far as the COVID lockdowns being a mistake, they were no mistake. It was done on purpose. It was done with forethought, and it was done throughout all the NATO and Five Eyes countries in lockstep. In fact, if you do your own research, which we were told not to do, you can find the plans for it dating back to 2010 with the Operation Lockstep from the Rockefeller Institute. And in 2019, in August of 2019, they ran a scenario called Event 201 in New York City, where the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the UN, the World Health Organization, the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, and the CIA got together and ran a tabletop exercise. What would happen if a novel coronavirus got out of China, and how would we lock down the world, and how we could achieve that, and how would we censor doctors and people who dissented from what was going on. So this wasn't no mistake. This was done on purpose. It was done throughout the Western countries. The only reason the United States of America did not fall in line as much, and there were people in states such as Florida and others that fought back against it, was because the United States of America has a First Amendment. They're also decentralized, where states have more power than the federal government. So they were able to ride out the wave a lot better. But 5 years on now, we can look back at all the studies that it had been an absolute disaster. The lockdowns, the mandates, the restrictions, they destroyed lives and broke up families. And the so-called mRNA vaccine, which is not a vaccine at all, but a gene therapy, is not either safe nor effective, and I don't care what anybody says, that is the truth, and it has devastated people's lives. Many people have died from it, many people have become seriously disabled and are getting no reprieve and exactly zero respect from anybody for what they went through. So all I have to say is, mistake, sure, not much of a mistake, my friend. I believe it was done on purpose, and we are going to, for generations to come, we are going to suffer the fallout. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, thank you. I have to be careful what I say, because believe it or not, 5 years on, you can still get shadow banned, algorithmically strangled, or even closed down for handling this situation and speaking entirely candidly, as you have. So we'll see what the impact of your call is on our various platforms. But there are a number of points that I think can safely be made. First of all, it wasn't only the countries under the sway of the Rockefellers that made this mistake, if it was a mistake. Countries as diverse as Cuba, Russia, and China, and North Korea also had full-on lockdowns. Iran had a full-on lockdown. So it was pretty much a global mistake, if mistake it was. And we really have to learn lessons from it. I would sum up the situation thus, that COVID was not as dangerous as they told us it was, and the vaccines were not remotely as successful as they told us they would be. I suppose a clue would have been in the indemnities that the drug companies negotiated for themselves, so that if, in the event, great harm was caused to the people given the vaccines, that there would be no comeback, no legal recourse for those victims against the drug companies. And as it's turned out, not only did the vaccine not stop transmission, in a gigantic number of cases, but there is growing evidence the vaccine caused considerable harm. And that's before we talk about the economic and social impact of these lockdowns. There's no doubt that many economies, our own included, were substantially wrecked by the lockdowns and the costs of the whole COVID affair. We will be paying an economic price for that for a very long time to come. And then the unquantifiable damage to the psyche, to the psychology of the people within families and within communities, within countries, which would take me all night to adumbrate. Thank you, RB, for that call. Now, some more comments on lockdowns. Peter MH says things have never fully recovered since COVID. Everything is a complete mess in the UK. Amen to that, Peter. And Cole Nasrallah says, can something really be considered a mistake if it had the desired outcome, further enriching trillionaires and billionaires while further impoverishing the rest of us? And Mr. Jonathan Ainsworth says, yes, however, I loved the absolute quietness. Very few planes, cars. It had bonfires in the woods with beers, or is that bears? It ended up being a really special and memorable time for me. Well, Jonathan, it's an ill wind that blows nobody any good. Karaoke Stars says, give us credit where credit is due. COVID was a global control exercise. In 2019, they set up Event 201. Simply Google Event 201. And Yasmin Patel says, lockdowns were a deliberate government policy, so not a mistake as such. The lockdowns should never have happened. John in Glasgow is on the line on this subject.
Hello, George. Can you hear me?
Yes, Mick,
Hello,
go ahead.
George. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Very clear.
George,
go ahead.
Just to give you a bit of background to who I am. My name's John Watt. I'm one of the victims of the COVID-19 vaccine, which in my personal opinion has been thing ever given out to the human, given out to the whole world, to be honest with you. I don't know if you've ever seen a video, George, of a man actually confronting the Prime Minister, who was Rishi Sunak.
No, go on, tell us about it.
So I went on to the
John.
TV. Hi, can you hear me, George?
Yes.
So I confronted the Prime Minister, who was at the time Rishi Sunak, on GB News, asking him to help the people who have been affected by the COVID-19 vaccine, and that man decided to turn his back on myself and has turned his back on millions of people. It seems to be that they have suppressed the biggest genocide, in my opinion, now, at this point in time. They've turned their back not only on me, but they've turned their back on people all around the world at this point. And for anybody who wants to sit here and say anything different, I personally believe that this has been a plan for what's to come. I do believe that this is the end of everybody's freedom, not just around the world, but I think in the UK as well. There are many things to be answered. Regarding COVID, the evidence shows that it wasn't as deadly as they made out, and the vaccines, there's no evidence to prove that it was ever safe and effective. Like I said, I have had over 25 TikTok accounts. I have been shut down on YouTube multiple times. I have had things hacked, and it seems to be that the COVID-19 vaccine seems to be the biggest cover-up in medical history. So for me, George, this has been
let's
the
just
biggest
hope you don't.
scam.
Let's just hope you don't get us shut down as well, John. Thanks though for the call, and I'm sorry for your troubles. I'm going to close the poll now. Total votes cast 22,868. 5 years on, were the COVID lockdowns a mistake? Yes or no? On Telegram, 89% say yes, they were a mistake. On X, 86% say yes, they were a mistake. YouTube community poll, 87% yes, and on the YouTube stream, 85% yes. So a very considerable majority of 22,868 people believe that the lockdowns were a mistake. Now, my Have It Out with Galloway show has suddenly really taken off. I had a spectacular with the one and only Scott Ritter just the other week, and since then the audience numbers have taken off. It's very important that I get the guests in the studio, on the studio wall, because that's what makes the show unique. So if you want to know how you can appear on my show, Have It Out with Galloway, here's how. Watch this. Join me on Have It Out with Galloway. Be on the studio wall. Participate in the debate about the greatest issues of our time. This is the place where we tackle the world's biggest problems and offer some of the world's best answers. You can have your say. Write to me at our website at haveitoutwithgalloway.com and join me here in the studio audience.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
I do hope you'll join me on that show, Have It Out with Galloway. Here's Palestinian 82 says, if it took 20 years in Syria, that's with an effing T, to replace the Taliban with the Taliban in Afghanistan, and Iran is larger, more modern, and has a security treaty with Russia, my money is on Iran. And Justice says 15,000 dead Syrians in 2 weeks. Never mind, the EU gave them €4.5 billion to continue on their path. Grape Entine says this is not about religion. Religion is just the tool to gain support. It's about class and imperialism, unipolar world order. And Ram Hasib says, hi, Mr. Galloway, every donor, regardless of how big or small, are all top donors. Absolutely right, Ram. I wish I'd said that. Let me take the last call of the evening. It's Assad in London on the JFK files. What did they do for you, Assad? Did they set your mind at rest?
Hi, George. Actually, my name's Atta, but you may remember me. They called me the boatman when we went to Gaza under your Viva Palestina. But I just wanted to, while you sort of...
I remember you very well, Atta. Yeah, very well. Yeah, great to hear from you. Go ahead.
Indeed. I just wanted to begin by saying that, in a way, I wanted to promote MOATS, firstly, by encouraging our viewers, or the viewers out there, to bring friends and family to the show, because it is indeed the University of the Airways. I mean, you have excellent informed guests, which makes it special. And, of course, the channel is one of the few channels for truth out there. And I really wanted to also encourage viewers to perhaps arrange local fundraising events for MOATS, because I think we all have a responsibility. If we want an honest channel out there to give us the freedom, then we have to do something to support it. So I just wanted to sort of reach out and say that. And if I may just very quickly say that, I think, George, you are one of the smartest people on the planet, and when you combine that with your morality and decency, I think it makes you a great ambassador of humanity. So anyway, that was my sort of initial comment. But on the JFK thing, I have for perhaps the last decade been thinking that I felt Israel was connected in some way because of their nuclear program, and how I think Jack Kennedy was a man of great morality and decency, and he didn't want that kind of proliferation. So I think he suffered. I mean, obviously, if they want to dispel that and they just have to remove the redaction, and then we'll see it for what it is. But I do think when you join the dots and do the arithmetic, it does point to Israel being involved in the assassination of JFK. But I just wanted to say, really, thank you very much for your show. Thank you very much for all that you've done to help humanity, really. So just thank you greatly, and I really hope others will do everything they can to support you.
I'm very touched by your call. I remember you so fondly on our great epic convoy to Gaza to break the siege on Gaza, because this didn't start on October the 7th. The year before last, of course, we were traveling in convoy to break the siege on Gaza 12 years ago, and earlier than that, beginning in 2009, I think. So you had a boat which you donated to the fisher folks community there in Gaza. It was an extraordinarily generous gift, and of course it was a very distinctive feature of our big long convoy going through deserts and the various countries along the way. The sight of your boat was unforgettable, and the sound of your voice, especially saying the beautiful things that you said, are very touching and moving to me. Nowadays, I'm beyond organizing and leading convoys and sleeping in my vehicle, as I did many times on that route. I think you probably slept in your boat, which was probably a bit roomier. It's wonderful to hear from you, and wonderful to remember those days, and heartbreaking to ponder what might have happened to that boat now, and what might have happened to the fishermen in it. Well, the killing continues in Gaza, the killing continues in Yemen, and the killers are the same old killers. And the shillers who propagandize for them are the same old shillers. We live in a world where morality is virtually extinct. We have a political class which is not just dwarfish and not just dwarfish thieves, but immoral individuals, degenerate individuals of the very worst kind, the most malignant kind. I don't know of a time, I'm not a good enough student of history to know epochs and eras gone by, but I personally don't know of a time when we in the West have been governed by a political class as bankrupt, both morally and intellectually, and in any sense that they know any way out of the steep decline in which our societies are plunged. I'm unaware of any phalanx of leaders of which it would be most difficult to decide who was the smallest, metaphorically speaking. Well, look, it's been marvelous for me. I hope it was for you. I hope you'll take Atta's advice and bring friends and family to the show and donate up $1, €1. Please don't avoid doing that, because we have no way of continuing this 2 shows a week unless you step up to the plate. Don't forget the No to Conscription League, which has its very first public meeting online tomorrow. It's at 9 p.m. UK, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and 8 a.m. in Sydney, down under in Australia. My good friend, Uncle Hoz, will be in the chair. His Excellency Peter Ford, the former British ambassador, is one of the speakers. Mick Stott, Workers' Party activist, leading activist, who is also a former serviceman of note, and the great journalist Warren Thornton. They are all speaking at 9 p.m. London time tomorrow on my platforms. I'm in such a nice hotel room. I'm down and sleep here the night. But I better get home to my missus. Forgive me for any shortcomings in the show this evening. Personally, I enjoyed it. I hope that you did too. And if you did, come back on Sunday at the same time in a better place. Good night.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.